We also have the MLI signing, which is coming up. We expect to have around 60 countries signing that instrument to already start implementing the tax treaty-related measures. So I think that, again, is a very big success. And that was, I mean, I have to say, when we started the work on the MLI, and it's to Mike's credit that we were able to complete it, but I had my doubts about whether we would come to a successful outcome on that, because it was quite a big, complex task.
Let me go back to why we decided we needed to look at having an MLI, though, John. If you look where we are, we have this network of bilateral tax treaties. You know, that of itself isn't necessarily the international norm in other areas. If you look at, say, civil aviation, there's a single convention, the ICAO treaty, which is amended every now and again, but there isn't the equivalent bilateral convention. Equally, you know, the model tax convention is a model. It isn't a convention. You know, it's the basis for the bilateral treaties. And there are about 3,400 bilateral treaties. So a problem that we recognised early on when starting the BEPS project was, you know, we're doing this work because, as Grace said, the public were very concerned that the rules were not fit for purpose. We're doing the work quickly because of that, to address that public concern, which translated into political concern. But what happens at the end? You know, if there is that concern, if you get the work done in 2 years, can you really then have a process in which there is no implementation quickly, and there is implementation in a sort of patchwork way? You know, by amending treaties bilaterally, A, it's a huge amount of work, B, you don't know which bits are going to be done in which order, and C, you're talking about changes that were needed quickly being done over a sort of 20 to 40 year period. So that was why we needed the MLI for the treaty-based changes that came from the BEPS project. We also agreed that we would look at incorporating a provision for mandatory binding arbitration on an optional basis for countries taking part in the instrument. And if you just sort of stand back and look at that for a moment, there are various countries, including the UK, that have pushed for arbitration, and we have arbitration in some of our treaties. There are other countries similarly placed, but it's one thing sort of saying in Parliament that you're in favour of arbitration, but if you've not got a treaty that actually provides for arbitration, then you haven't got arbitration. Equally, you might say that you're prepared to amend your treaty, but you never quite get round to it, or the counterparties that you want to change the treaties with, you know, they're busy negotiating new treaties and give priority to that. So, you know, it seems to me the great virtue of the instrument in that sense is you're going to get about 20 countries jumping sort of at the same time for arbitration, so you get a major step forward on arbitration. Having done that, you're then also creating a test bed, if you like, for the other countries that may have doubts about arbitration to see whether it works or not. The structure of the instrument out with arbitration, we were clear early on that to the extent that the BEPS outputs need treaty changes and their minimum standards, then countries adopting the instrument have to take all the minimum standards. But beyond that, we're equally clear that we needed flexibility so countries could choose. Why? If we'd not done that, then very few countries would have signed, so we wouldn't have achieved the objectives.
First, by just adding a little bit to what Mike said about the advantages of the MLI, and in particular focus on the benefits of having this approach for developing countries, because as Mike said, you know, it can take decades to revise a treaty network, and usually what happens is countries which have very small tax treaty negotiating teams prioritize their treaties, and it's logical they're going to prioritize their negotiations with their largest trading partners. So, unfortunately, too often, developing countries get stuck at the end of that prioritization list, whereas here, with this instrument, it can all happen at the same time, and I think we are helping developing countries